1.
Thinking about these glitch in the Matrix stories reminds me of a time when I was about 9 or 10 years old. A friend and myself were really into playing around with fireworks one summer, and over a period of time that summer, he pointed something out. He showed me his fingertips, and I swear that I could see some flames coming out from them. Not big flames, but like when you would see from a butane lighter that was almost completely out of fuel. Just enough to see it. This lasted for a few seconds, and then like a few days later, it happened to me as well. I didn't even feel any heat, but I could see these slight flickering flames coming out of my fingertips. Very weird stuff.
Two.
I have never been one for obscure or far-fetched conspiracy theories, but this short event that happened to me almost a month ago has been playing on my mind ever since. I work at a DIY hardware store, and this one in particular was a day that was very quiet. I was walking up one of the aisles when we sell big bags of building sand and cement, etc. There was one man standing there with a cart, looking at all these bags of building sand. I walked past him and went out back for about 5 to 10 seconds before remembering something that I needed to grab. I turned back around and went back outside onto the aisle, and the man was walking away with at least 25 to 30 bags of this very heavy building sand. There is no way that one person could load up that many bags of this heavy stuff in such a short amount of time. It just isn't humanly possible. I have to lift these things all the time, and I know how heavy they are. I felt myself become very hot, and I felt almost sick with confusion as to what I had just seen. I told one of my coworkers about it, and he just thinks I must have been out back for longer than I thought. But I genuinely walked in, remembered something, and then turned back around. I cannot explain it.
Three.
I grew up in a bad area with a shady motel behind my house. One time this guy was trying to talk to me when I was a child, but I had just had tubes put in my ears, so I couldn't hear what he was saying. I smiled and walked away. Weeks later, that same man was found with 2 kidnapped teenage boys that he had sexually assaulted.
Four.
I distinctly remember Hotel Transylvania 3 coming out and the DVD being available. I saw it in a movie shop, and for whatever reason, despite distinctly seeing this, for whatever reason, I just recently found out that the second movie had only just come out. I still have no solution for this, and I was honestly floored when I found out that it wasn't out. I didn't even watch any of the movies until a few weeks ago. I have no explanation.
5.
This is a terrifying, true encounter I had in the Los Padres forest. In 1994, when I was 23 years old, I decided to go on a week-long camping trip alone to get my thoughts together. I had just graduated from the college here in California, and I needed to make some decisions about my future. I decided to go camping in the Los Padres National Forest, as I had been there before as a kid, and it was quite peaceful. I packed my things, drove to the park, and bought the week-long permit camping pass that I needed. I told my parents where I was going, and they weren't too excited about me going alone, but as I am a male and well-built, they only asked that I pack a knife for protection. I obliged. I parked my car and set forth down the trail that I had chosen. My plan was to hike to a small pond that was about 12 miles down the trail and spend my week there fishing, relaxing, and thinking about what I should do with the rest of my life. I hiked from morning to about 6 p.m. and took my time taking pictures, eating my lunch, and even writing in my journal. At about 6 p.m., I finally reached the pond, and I unpacked my tent and equipment and got ready to go to sleep. I was so tired that I passed out and did not wake up until the next morning. In the morning, I made some coffee, made a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and threw my fishing line into the pond. Over a couple of hours, I caught a couple of bluegill, and I was getting some much-needed solitude. I gutted my fish and put them back in the water so that they would stay cool for a couple of hours, so that I could make them for lunch. After this, I went back to my tent and decided to take a nap. I fell asleep fast. About 30 minutes into my nap, I was awoken by a woman crying hysterically from what seemed to be a few hundred meters away. I distinctly got up and quickly opened my tent and turned toward where I had heard the crying. What I saw scared me instantly. I saw a naked woman about 70 meters away, in what I would guess was her 40s, walking in my direction. She had long brown hair that was tangled, and her face was contorted in a way that made her cries that much more frightening. This woman was filthy all over, and she was bleeding from what I could only describe as her groin genital region. My first reaction was shock, but after a few seconds I cleared my head and ran into my tent to grab my knife. Then I walked over to the crying lady, who was still crying hysterically, and I asked her what happened. As I got close to her, she reached out to me as if to give me an embrace. I hesitantly gave her one of my hands to hold onto, and then walked her over to my tent. She didn't say a word. She just kept crying and leaning herself onto me. When we got to my tent, I handed her some paper towels and some extra clothes that I had. Then I asked her again what happened, and if I could help her clean up or help her in any way that I could. She ignored the towels and clothes and just let them fall to the floor. She then asked in a smoky, exhausted voice, very low, if she could lay down in my bed. I thought that she was a rape victim for sure, so I told her yes, definitely. She then lay down on top of my sleeping bag and just kept crying and shaking. I decided to just let her be for a while and started packing up my stuff, as I figured I would have to run back to get help for this woman, as there was no cell phone reception there. After about 25 minutes, I collected all of my belongings and walked back over to the tent to see if the woman had calmed down. I unzipped the tent and looked inside. The woman was just lying there, no longer crying, but just staring at nothing. I again asked her what happened, but she still didn't answer. I then began to tell her that I was going to run and get help, and that she could come with me or just stay there until help arrived. Again, she said nothing. Then I told her that I was going to run to the ranger station and that I would be back as soon as possible. I left her some water and some food and started walking back towards the trail. As I got to the trail, I heard a man's voice yelling from across the pond from our point. I turned to where I heard the yelling, and I saw a man about 200 meters away, also naked, with a long beard and lots of body hair. I could not understand what he was saying at first, but as he got closer, I could understand the words, "I am no good, I am no good," in a low, almost unintelligible groan. I was so freaked out by this point that I was frozen in fear. I was thinking about my options when I noticed the woman getting out of my tent and started walking towards the man with arms wide open. He then began running towards her and she towards him. When they reached each other, they embraced. At this point, I was in total confusion and shock about what was happening. I just stood there and watched whatever it was that I was watching happen. After what seemed like 30 minutes, they let go of each other and I could see them talking. The woman pointed towards me and then pointed towards her stomach. She then walked for a little while longer and then they both started walking over towards me. I again just stood there trying to figure out what was going on. As they got within 50 meters of me, the woman and man both started yelling at me almost simultaneously, "You can help us!" I, still confused, yelled back at them, "Help you with what?" And then I said, "What happened?" The man and woman did not reply, but only put their arms in a baby swaddling position in the universal signal for a baby. I yelled back at them, "What baby?" in a concerned voice. The man then said, "I am no good. We need you for baby." Then I said, "I don't understand." And then I started to take a few steps back. At this point, the woman grabbed 2 large rocks from the ground and handed one to the man. They then began running towards me. I was terrified and dropped my backpack on the ground and started sprinting as fast as I could down the trail. I could hear them screaming at me, "We need your help with baby," over and over again at me, and I could hear them scrambling down the trail behind me. They had no shoes and the trail was very rocky, so I knew that if I just kept running, they could not keep up for very long. After about 15 minutes, I slowly heard their cries die down to the point where I could no longer hear them. It took me 6 hours to get back to the ranger station with me running and then taking a break when I needed to. When I got to the ranger station, I threw open the door and began explaining what just happened to the ranger. He knew that I was serious from the emotion that I conveyed and told me that he was going to get some backup to go out there and check out the situation and to retrieve my belongings for me. He advised me to just sit in the ranger station and that they would be riding their ATVs out there within the hour. I told him that I would rather just go home and that if he could just call me after they investigated the situation. He said that was okay. I drove the 2 hours home and told my family what had happened and waited with them for the phone call. I ended up falling asleep at my parents' bed like a child and slept through the night. The next morning, my father woke me up and told me that he had just gotten off the phone with the Rangers, and they had taken a naked man and woman into custody. They told my father that the two people would not identify themselves, and they found them on the trail walking back in the direction of the pond. The man and woman were taken to a psychiatric hospital, and both were identified as schizophrenic individuals. Nothing else was known about them. They couldn't figure out who they were or how they had gotten to that location. That is all they could tell us. As for my equipment, I told them I didn't want it anymore, as much of it was caked in blood and who knows what else. We found out a few months later that the couple had set up a campsite hidden near the edge of the pond area, and that the Rangers had found one grave of a very small, miscarried fetus. The man and woman were identified as a married couple who had gone off their medication and decided to move out into the woods to live away from society. They, from what everyone guessed, had tried to start a family out there, but due to malnutrition, the woman had a miscarriage. I guess the man had blamed himself for being no good and wanted me to take the place in impregnating his wife. This is by far the creepiest thing ever to happen to me, and I have never been camping since that day. This has forever changed me as a person and has made me very wary of strangers. I hope no one else has to experience what I did on that day, and to the crazy people I met out there in my youth, let's not meet again. Thank you so much for watching and supporting the show. If you have a story to share, send us an email, like us on Facebook, share, like, and subscribe.